Hey y'all, welcome to Redneck Gunworks. Today we have a special episode for you. We don't do a lot of episodes like this, but we actually have a Marine 22 long rifle. That's what I said, a Marine 22 long rifle. We'll tell you more about it here in just a minute.
Redneck Gunworks!
Man, we have got a treat for you today. This is the model 165 Harrington and Richardson 22 long rifle, aka the Leatherneck. That's right, the Leatherneck. As soon as I saw that on the barrel, I knew that I had to research this gun. This is a pretty rare opportunity to be able to actually hold one of these. There weren't many of them made, and they're fairly obscure just because of the history on them. So let's get right to the facts on this one, okay? This was designed by Eugene Reising. That's right, the same Eugene Reising who did all the work with John Browning on the 1911. The same guy who had over 65 patents dealing with the 1911. He made a lot of really cool innovations to the 1911, but he also did something really cool, and that is he designed a submachine gun specifically for World War II. Now this was a really cool machine gun because, like the Thompson of its time, it was in 45 ACP. However, instead of the $250 that it took to manufacture it, it was a $48 firearm. The reason for it was because it was just simple, just terribly simple. Only 3 moving parts in the gun. So this is built on that same patent, just chambered down into a 22. The reason why it was chambered down into a 22 long rifle is so that they could train for the submachine gun with this gun. So this was actually a production model for the Marine Corps to train on, so that they weren't wasting a whole bunch of 45 ammo that needed to go to the war effort. They could shoot the smaller 22 rifles. It was a little safer on the range, less fatigue on the soldiers, and it was just a little bit lighter round. But the cool thing about that, and you know what, the military still does that. Look, when I went through in the Navy, the first gun that I ever got to fire in the Navy was a 22 variation of the Colt 1911. Of course, I was back in the 80s when they were still using the 1911 in the Navy instead of the Beretta PT series. So anyway, back to this. This is a really cool gun because it's made on Eugene Reising's patent, and it is pronounced Reising. This was the trainer for the Model 50 SMG, which a lot of people don't even know what that is. That was literally the redheaded stepchild in World War II. It was, you either loved it or you hated it. A lot of Marines, you would still see them, even after the Marines had other weapons available to them, you would still see them with the SMG 50s, specifically the Model 55. The paratroopers really liked that one. It was a very, very short rifle, had a collapsible wire buttstock, probably the cheapest, worst buttstock I've ever seen on any gun. But the gun really worked pretty good, except when it got sand in it, say like in Iwo Jima and places like that. It just had some open ports and some different places for stuff to get into, and so it was a little tougher to maintain. At the same time, not all the parts, some of the parts were still hand fitted in these, and so it didn't work real well if you were just going to break down a whole bunch of them, throw the parts in there, and wash them all together and then just pick up a part and put it in a gun. That didn't really work well. So the Marine Corps ended up discontinuing the Model 50, Model 55, and the Model 65. But this gun, a lot of the Marines coming home, they still liked this gun. And so this gave them the opportunity to have a sporting rifle like the one that they carried in World War II. So that's what this is. This is actually the civilian model. This model was made from 1947 to 1949. This model, or this serial number, is a higher serial number, so it was probably early in 1949 when this one was made, the best that we can figure on the serial number on it. But this actually would give those guys returning back home a sporting rifle. Now, the downside of this is it does have a 23-inch barrel. Well, that's not a downside. That's actually a good thing if you're looking for accuracy, but it is 6.5 pounds. Very heavy gun. Because it was designed to train them for an SMG, submachine gun, they wanted them to get used to the weight of it. So when they started producing it for civilians, Actually, the 6.5 pounds is a little bit lighter. The original one that the Marines trained with was closer to 7.5, 8 pounds. So they did actually shave some of the weight off of it. Some really cool things of it. It does use the model M79 Redfield peep sight. This is a very precise little peep sight. We had a chance to play with it a little bit. I gotta tell you, it's really cool. I will tell you this though, the ring in it, the actual aperture in there is kind of big. I would like to see that a little bit smaller, but I guess that's probably never gonna happen because they don't make this gun anymore. So if you have one of these, or if you're able to get your hands on one of these, a smaller aperture would probably work a little better. Other than that, we really don't have any complaints on it. Another cool thing about this gun is it does come with a 10-round magazine. I did see where you could still get some of these. It's kind of quirky though, because it is a really, really old follower style, kind of the old 1911 type of magazine. And it's got little holes in it so that you can see how many shells are in there, which is really weird because it's got one for the 10 round, which is max capacity on this, but it also has one for the 8th round. Not sure why that was, or maybe that was just to help lighten it. I'm not real sure. Pretty cool. Got Eugene Reising's name right there on the clip, so pretty cool. The interesting thing though is that when you put it in the gun, you can only see the 10th hole. So you can only look and tell if it's fully loaded. But I'm not knocking it. That's still kind of cool. To be honest with you though, not real sure what that's about. It's just another place for dirt to get into, which was one of the complaints about these guns. So here's the cool part about it. Only 3 moving parts, just like the original gun. It's got a really weird bolt assembly in there. We're going to tear this thing down here in just a little bit and show you that really weird bolt assembly. But how about we shoot this thing? Oh, almost forgot the most important part. And that is, well, it's not the most important part, but to me it's one of the coolest parts. And that is, notice there's no charging handle anywhere on the gun. That's because the charging handle is right there. That is the coolest thing. You literally charge this thing by, all right, we got it on safe. You literally put your finger in there, and that's how you charge the gun. It was the same way with the SMG. This, because there's only 3 moving parts, this actually follows the bolt back and forth. It actually cycles with the bolt, and so they tucked it into the stock to make it just a little bit easier to not hang your hand on and jam the gun up, or, you know, bend one of your digits in a way that it shouldn't be bent. So that was another innovation. Eugene Reising really did some cool things with this gun. I can't wait to break it down, but I can't wait to shoot it either. All right, so we're gonna shoot this thing, and I gotta tell y'all, this is one of my favorite guns to shoot. Man, this thing is a truckload of fun. So, hang on, let's reload this thing and do it again. All right, well, let's rail this thing. Man, that's like I said, I'm not used to shooting with that big aperture on the back of it. I'm used to it being a little bit tighter. So that's an excuse already. Anyway, but we love this gun. Let's reload this thing and we're gonna finish this off. Here we go. Let's do this again. Wow. All right, pretty cool. Missed a few, but you know, I never claimed to be a great shot. Awesome little gun. Let's take this over to the table. We're gonna break it down, and I'm gonna show you what really makes this cool. So we'll see in just a second. I thought I was missing on a lot of those shots. I couldn't really explain why I thought I was missing, but let me show you something really cool about this. 2 shots in that one. I thought I missed that one. Shot in that one. I thought I missed it too, but I didn't. So 2 shots in that one without it breaking. One shot in that one without breaking. And well, the rest of them we just won't talk about. Anyway, let's go take this gun apart. I'll show you real quick disassembly on this rifle. It really breaks down quick, and that makes a lot of sense because it was based on a military rifle, or actually was made for the military. So what we'll do is we'll actually turn the gun over. Right here is a little thumb screw. We'll take this thumb screw. It is a slotted thumb screw. In case it's on too tight, you can use a flat piece of steel or a big screwdriver or something like that. You take that off. Actually, just pull it out like that. It is a captured bolt, so you don't have to worry about it coming all the way out. Pull it out. We're going to lay this stock over here. Then you'll see the magazine well, which magazine out. This magazine well is actually one whole component. So to take that off, you'll see these two screws right here, or bolts. You'll need some flat piece of steel. This is actually a choke tube wrench. I found that this works really well to be able to grab both of those ears in that and just open it up. It's not on really tight, but it's on there pretty snugly. So you'll need something to do that with. And you can see, you know, we're just putting about that much pressure on it. So we take these off. So you just unscrew these. Set those off to the side. There. And the whole magazine assembly comes out. Pretty cool, I thought. So we'll put that there. Now this next bit, you kind of go out of order. And that is that you need to take this end cap off of here. Same type of end cap as that was, as far as just being kind of a thumb screw. You unscrew this here. And then out comes the end plug, the plunger or the hammer spring, and I'll explain that here in just a second. That's kind of a weird hammer spring. This thing's got a really weird hammer, so you got to check that out. Then we're going to pull the hammer out. The way that you pull the hammer out is you have to pull this up, kind of get your pinky down in there, and then you pull the trigger and then tilt back, and out comes your hammer. And that's the hammer. This thing is huge. This is that unique thing that I was telling you about, is just how crazy this hammer is. I mean, I don't know if you get a real good picture of that, but this thing is huge. It is milled out on the end, so it's not just a solid chunk of steel, but still, it is quite significant. Can you imagine the firing pin or the primer that it would take to withstand that and not bust? This thing will pop a primer on anything, I would imagine. And this is the carryover from that M50. This was actually the hammer that was going back and forth and hitting on that firing pin. Really cool design on it, very significant on how this was made. But another thing about this, why we say that there's so many or so few moving parts on this thing, is this right here is actually the sear engagement on the hammer. So this trigger, literally, when you pull this trigger, it drops a little gate lever in there. When that little gate lever drops down, this goes forward, and it flies forward, hits your firing pin, engages, and starts the whole cycle of the rifle. So huge bolt. Okay, now this next bit is kind of kooky, but you have to raise up on this piece here. Then you have to pull this whole charging handle to the rear, up, and over all of that craziness. And I hope that y'all caught that, because that thing just went flying everywhere. This, of course, is the pin that went flying. I usually try to do that without it flying everywhere, but you guys got to see the real issue of it. Is all of this spring is tucked into this little part here. So just an enormous amount of spring pressure. But this right here is, not only is this your recoil spring, but this actually is the spring that's responsible for pulling your bolt assembly back forward. This whole charging handle is linked in to your bolt assembly, and it all acts as one piece. Even though it is two separate pieces, when you put it together, it's locked in place, and it actually travels with your bolt. So that's just not many moving parts on all this. Of course, it does have a guide rod for that spring. Of course, here's your bolt. Really simple bolt on this. Not a lot to it. It's just a milled piece of, looks to be what, like stainless steel. Of course, there's your ejector. It has a hole milled on the side of the bolt here that this little lever actually pushes down into, and that is actually your bolt capture. So that's pretty cool. But that's it. That's the whole gun. I mean, this is all your guts out of the gun. That's it. And of the moving parts, you have charging handle, bolt, and hammer. That's your moving parts. That's what actually cycles in that action. What happens is this hammer is actually held back. This is actually locked in. The hammer goes forward, hits that firing pin. The whole mechanism goes back. Then this part comes back forward. Your hammer's held back to the rear because of that sear engagement. You pull the trigger again, and bam, there she goes. And it's actually one of the weird things about this. I want to show y'all just kind of one of the kooky things about this gun. And that's this, that the bolt is actually, here, let me use that spring to push that all the way up in there. That's where your bolt is when it's in battery. Let me show you where your hammer is in battery. Okay. There. That's where your hammer is. There's this whole open chamber right here is how much lock time or how much lock space there is. This little hammer has to go all the way forward. Let me show you how far this hammer has to travel. Okay, I'm gonna put some tension on the spring just with my fingers and pull the trigger. That's how far the bolt has to, or the hammer has to move to hit the bolt. That hammer, the length of that hammer is about the same length that it has to travel to hit. So it's got a weird lock time, especially for a 22. You know, you pull the trigger and then that hammer has to go so far forward to hit that thing. It's like you pull the hammer and then a split second later it fires, almost like a almost like a Revolutionary era gun. Not quite the same lock time, but you get the point. It has a really long bolt. I'll tell you what, it really acts like an open bolt machine gun type in the lock time. Now the difference is with an open bolt machine gun, this whole mechanism would be moving forward, which causes the gun to jar, and so you miss a lot more. This was actually a closed bolt system, but it has a long lock time. But also understand that that was kind of one of those things of it being an early submachine gun. You know, this thing was designed to be World War II submachine gun. So still kind of primitive on some of the ways that this thing worked, but that's just the way of it. So all right, so I've got these two back in order. Now normally what you would want to do is you would want to go ahead and shove this spring in there, and then go ahead and put this plug back in. But we can't do that yet, because another one of the quirky little things about this gun is that it we got to use this spring for another option here. So hang on, and I swear to y'all, this is the way that this is what the manual says on how to do this. But this big long spring, the reason why it shot out is because there's nothing holding it. It's not a retained spring. So, and once again, this is what the manual says. But you take the guide rod, and this guide rod actually has a couple of holes milled through it. What those holes for, you wouldn't believe this, is you actually put this spring, and you take your fingers and just mash the spring. Also do it in a nice open room, because if it goes flying across the room, you're gonna need to find all these parts. I know that because I've done it a couple of times. That's why we're in an open part of the shop right now instead of doing it on the workbench, is because I don't want to have flying parts shooting around the workbench where we're all working. So anyway, so you take this spring, you shove it down as far as you possibly can, and then you literally take the end of your hammer spring, you push it into one of those holes to where it goes all the way through, and that holds the spring tension back. I swear to you, that's what the manual says. So then you take this spring, you put it back into that, and into the charging handle guide system here. Take the rod, push it down in there as far as you can, and then you're actually going to take this mechanism, put this rod, I don't know if y'all can see that, let me move this just a little bit, put this rod back in the little hole where it goes, and then place your charging handle back over the two springs that the magazine well normally set in, and stick your charging handle down in the slot in the bolt. Now once this is all put back together, you put your magazine well back on, magazine well assembly, then you're going to put these two bolts or nuts back on, basically. I'm just going to put them on finger tight for right now. And then you back the pressure off of that, and now your charging handle is back in shape, or back where it's supposed to be. Then you can take your spring, put it back in the end of the gun, put your cap back on, and screw the whole thing back in. A lot of threads on that thing. Now, if you hear it clicking, hang on. There's actually some little detents in this thing, and there's actually a little pin that comes out, a spring pin that comes out, that this locks into those detents, so you don't have to worry about that backing out. So we're gonna put just a little bit of snugness on that with that little flat tool. Now she's ready to go back in the stock. And that goes back in. Once again, this one has a little pin, spring-fed pin, or spring-assisted pin that locks into the detents on this. So you just screw it down till it stops and gets in one of those detents, and there you go. It's the 165 Leatherneck all back together. Well, hope y'all enjoyed the video. We certainly enjoyed getting our hands on this and shooting it, having a great time with it. I definitely suggest, if you ever have the opportunity to pick one of these up and fire it, please do. It's an important piece of our history, especially in gun manufacturing history. It is kind of quirky, it's awkward, but you know, like I said earlier, that's one of the things that I like about it, is it's just kind of awkward, it's just kind of kooky. And I love this little gun. It's a kick in the pants to shoot, especially with the longer lock time on it. It will definitely show if you're flinching or anything like that. So great gun just to take out and have a good time with. It's definitely one of those heirloom guns that you don't have to just put up. You can take this thing out, you can shoot it, it's sturdy, you can get a lifetime of enjoyment out of it, and still, you know, have your hands on a piece of history. So once again, hope y'all had a great time watching this video. We certainly had a great time making it, and we'll see you next time.
Redneck Gunworks!
Almost cut my titty off.